Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Vibin It. We are so pleased to have you here joining us for another epic episode. And today we have an awesome guest, Mr. Joe Hawley. Did I say your last name right? I never know if it's like Howley, like a wolf, or if it's like Hawley. Like
I still don't know.
Looks like Hawley to me.
Yeah, people say it both ways.
All right. I mean, I think both ways are cool, so we'll just go with it. So, Mr.
What's your daddy say? What does your mom say?
Well, all the Polynesians I played with at UNLV when I went to college called me Howley because in the Polynesian culture it means white boy.
So maybe that's where it's from.
So Howley works, but Hawley so also works. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, regardless, we have Joe here, and he's a former NFL athlete turned entrepreneur who is focused on men's emotional well-being, and he specifically helps facilitate healing and transformation for former elite level athletes. And how I was able to get Joe on the show is because my boyfriend used to play football professionally, and so he knows a lot of football players, and I think he was connected with you through his best friend Mike, who also played football. And I just love what you're doing to help create healing and transformation in a space where maybe it's more taboo or weird or not so encouraged in the world where you come from. And I thought it would be really beneficial to have you on the show because everyone can identify with having a big identity shift or crisis, like similar to the one that you went through, and the shift that you help your former athletes through when they have to go into like the regular world of being like a normal person, and you don't get to like beat people up every day, and you don't get to be the best in the world at that thing anymore. And like that one thing that your identity was so wrapped up in, now you're just like, who am I? And that's really scary. So today I thought it would be great to just kind of talk on it and normalize like recreating yourself anew. And if it's scary and weird, like that's cool. I think we can all talk on our own personal transformation stories and journeys because everybody has one. So thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks, ladies, for having me. Really excited to have this conversation with you. And yeah, I mean, the question you asked, who am I? I think it's a question that everybody needs to ask themselves. And there's obviously an infinite number of layers to that question. And I think a lot of people don't ever really scratch the surface of what it really means to ask that question on a deep level. And I think, talked about transition. Everybody goes through big transitions. Like it's just a huge part of being human, understanding the impermanence of life. And I think it is something that a lot of people struggle with. And there's a grieving process that needs to happen, a letting go of an old story, an old identity, and developing the tools and the practices to navigate transition and then rebuild that story of who you are. And for me, working with athletes, there's a lot of unique challenges. We can discuss what those are, but I think it's a really beautiful opportunity to reframe that. And it's an opportunity, and although it's very raw and a vulnerable place to be, when you go through transition, no matter what it is, whether you're going through a big relationship transition, breakup, moving cities, losing your job, trying to figure out like what you need to do with your life, your purpose, your meaning, all of these things. It's a beautiful place to look within and start, understanding what it is I want to create and get into a place of becoming the creator of your reality, and letting go of these stories that no longer serve you. And you look out into the world, and collectively, it seems like we're all going through a huge transition with everything that's going on. And so I think these topics of healing and transition are very important, especially in the day and age that we live in. I think everybody is really going to have to, at some point, if they haven't already, look deep within themselves and realize, who they want to be, who they are, and to know who you are is real, true power to become the creator of your reality and be able to show up and, make an impact in the world and be of service. But there is a hard challenge of like grieving the old and letting go of these old things that no longer serve you and shifting your environment. And there's all these tools we can talk about on how to navigate that properly. But yeah, it's really, really beautiful work. And I think it's something everybody needs. And it all does start with that question of who am I?
So yeah, I got a question. Who am I? No, I'm just kidding. We'll get there. I have a question because I know that being in the industry that you are in, for so long, what kind of got you to ask the question? Because I think we prefaced this in the beginning of the episode, like it is a little bit seen as a taboo subject, from the outside looking in, of like these really athletic, strong bodied men, like they're not sitting around meditating, asking who they are deep down inside and wanting to create their best life. That's the idea. So what got you to first ask the question of, okay, maybe there's something deeper, and then have that intention to help other people ask that question? Have you always been kind of this way, to look a little deeper, or is this something that just kind of, I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. There's two parts to that story. So the actual asking the question, like while I was playing, I played football for 16 years of my life. I started in high school and retired when I was 29, played 8 years in the NFL. And it wasn't until, because I knew who I was during that.
Yeah.
Like I knew what I wanted, and I had this singular focus of I'm going to be the best football player I can be. And that was, as we can talk about, every path leads infinitely away from where we're at now. And so that was an infinite path of like, how can I continue to be better, and got to a point where my body started getting worn down, mentally stressed out, just a high performance anxiety of having to show up and prove myself day in and day out. And eventually that came to a point where like, you have to show up, and you have to, even if it's just a micro percent better, you have to focus on that, or you're going to get worse and someone else is going to take your spot. So even while I was playing, I never really appreciated how far I had made it in one of the most difficult things to do in the world. Reflecting back and doing all this healing work and processing over the last few years, I can look back and be like, whoa, I've really accomplished a lot. But when I'm in it, it's like constantly having to grind, push myself. Yeah. And so, when I was, and this is what I talked about earlier, like it's such a beautiful opportunity, because when I was finally done playing, I went through a big transition in my relationship. I was engaged at the time, broke up with my fiance 4 weeks before my final game. And it was a whole process leading up to that. And so I basically, after my final game, like 3 weeks after, like I had left everything I had known behind. And so it was this real blank canvas, and it forced me to ask the question, who am I without this thing that has defined me for so long? And that's what led me down this healing path of self-discovery and self-realizations, because I started asking those deeper existential questions. And I wanted to know who I was without football and how I related to the world, how I was known, because one of the unique challenges that I didn't realize, and I think most former athletes don't realize until you're done playing, is like my identity is wrapped up in this thing, but everybody I know in my life, the identity of who I was to them was wrapped up in this thing as well. And so I felt very estranged from my family and my parents. They didn't really know how to engage with me. Like I was a football player as their son, and so no longer had that identity of a football player. We kind of didn't know how to communicate. And I just didn't really know where I fit in the world. And so that led me on a journey of self-discovery and healing, which, I basically gave away all my stuff to charity, bought a van, and I traveled the country with my dog for like 2 years.
I love a good sell your stuff and get a van story. Yeah. I really do. My husband's been trying to get me to do that since before we had kids, and I still haven't given in, but I love hearing about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best thing I've ever done, because it really, it built my confidence in who I am and what I'm capable of, and being able to be alone and get out into the world and constantly experience new things and novel experiences without this kind of thing that had defined me for so long. And so that led me on the journey. As far as like the tools and the kind of the environment of football, I actually started getting into like meditation and learning about these different spiritual practices because of it. It was such a high, intense, stressful environment. And I grew up in a Christian household. So like even meditation was taught to me as like this evil Eastern mysticism, or the way Satan's going to make its way into your mind. So I always had a lot of resistance to meditating. And it wasn't until about, I think my 4th or 5th year, they had these mindset coaches come in, and they said, we're going to teach you about meditation. Meditation is just a tool. It's like working out the mind. Like, what if you could decrease stress, anxiety, increase performance, and focus on the field? This is a tool that can do that. And so I was like, okay. And so I started, meditating. And obviously, like most people who start meditating, like, oh, I can't really do this right. Like my mind is so fast and crazy. But realizing like how it was shared to me is like, if I'm in the weight room, in order to build muscle, I have to do reps. And every time I do like a bicep curl, like that's a rep, and it rips my muscle up so that it can heal and grow and become bigger and stronger. And so every time you notice that your mind is crazy and you're lost in your thoughts, but you come back to letting those go and be present, like that's a rep. And the more that you can do that, the more you can train it, and the more you can like let those thoughts go instantly. And then eventually they kind of they're not as strong. They don't come in as strong, and you can have an awareness of them. And that's definitely been a journey over like the last 7 or 8 years to even get to a point like that. It's definitely a process. But that kind of got me involved in the work. And then a similar time, all the research around CTE and TBI and brain trauma started coming out. And that really developed an underlying fear within me. Like I played football for so long, there's no way I don't have these issues. Like I've hit my head plenty of times. And so that forced me on the path of being very proactive with my brain health. And so I started learning more about nutrition, and that's when I started taking better care of my body physically, and then learning about different ways to, neuroplasticity and neurogenesis on how to create new neural pathways in the brain. And so meditation is one of those. Reading and learning novel concepts, experiencing new things creates new neural pathways, travel. And so all of these things I really went after because I wanted to really be proactive in that way. And then, that's, being on the road and traveling and reading books and listening to podcasts and experiencing new things, like, were all so good for my brain. But what also it did is it opened me up spiritually in a lot of different ways as well. And just my own personal growth from that experience has really gotten me to a place of understanding the deeper levels of reality for myself through my own experience, my own connection to God, and really letting go of like the old Christian dogmatic belief system that I always had questions around, and going out into the world and really discovering for myself my own connection to this thing that is greater than the self. And to define it is even to not give it, the full justice that it deserves.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm a hypnotherapist. And so you talk about neuroplasticity and creating new neural pathways. I'm like, yes. So have you ever tried hypnosis as a side note? I mean, meditation and hypnosis are like sisters.
Like trance states, right? Like being able to just drop in.
Yeah. I mean, with hypnosis, you're just kind of going to a deeper level. But interestingly, I have a colleague who only did sports performance hypnosis, and she would go to these like athletic practices and things like that, and just do like the mindset, like a sports hypnosis where you can just up your best every time, and it's all a mindset. There's so many athletes that found this idea, and it's like, it's just such an amazing tool to have, because everything kind of traces back to your mind. If you believe it, you can do it.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so excited with the work I'm doing now with helping facilitate the healing and growth for former elite level athletes, is because all of these spiritual practices and deeper healing and looking at the stories of who I am, like, I have a really strong foundation because of all the lessons from football, like the visualization, the being able to overcome limiting beliefs and handling failures. And like all of these things create a foundation of like elite level athletes are really special individuals who really know what it's like to push themselves to the pinnacle. And they have to have a foundation of understanding that the mind can become a tool, and you can actually shift those thoughts to become what you want. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when they're done playing, they don't have anywhere to put that energy that they've spent so much like focusing on this one thing. And if we can give them the tools to find where to put that energy and direct it towards themselves, and to look at the deeper parts of who they are, and they move those out of the way and really recreate a story, they can show up and do pretty big things in the world. It's just really exciting.
So cool. I love it.
Yes, it's very good. And yeah, it's really cool, your story and how it's transpired into helping people, because I always like to think like our biggest struggle is like where we can add the most value to the world once we've kind of gotten through it to a certain degree, because we all go through the same stuff. At the end of the day, even if it's not the same experience, it comes down to the same emotional experiences, right? Like we all have the same core feelings. We all kind of want the same things out of life, generally speaking, to be fulfilled, to be happy, to have connection, whatever it is. So I think it's really, really cool what you're doing. And I just love everything about it. I don't really know what else I was going to say. I feel like I was going to add something more important than that, but I'll just stick with the cup.
Are you guys familiar with the 5 core wounds? I forget who wrote, Lisa Bordell, I think, wrote a book about it, but we all,
I feel like I've heard of it. Yeah.
The 5 core wounds, which
I have not read this one.
It's really good. And when you read it and start understanding, like, these are the base 5 woundings that we all experience as children, and they shape the lens in which we view reality. And so to do this deeper healing work and to get to the core of it is to really find out when you experience these woundings for the first time and be able to process them. Because a lot of times when we're children, all the time when we're children, we don't have the resources, the tools, the support to really feel seen or loved or supported when we go through these experiences. And it doesn't have to be some traumatic experience like sexual abuse. It could be something like, for the first time your parents left you, your grandparents, and left you, you could develop an abandonment wounding where it's like, my parents just left me. And something as simple as that goes into the unconscious. And then every time you're in a relationship and your partner leaves you, it triggers an abandonment story within you, right? Yeah. And so the 5 core wounds are abandonment, injustice, humiliation, rejection, and betrayal.
Mm.
And so all of us experience all 5 of these at some point, but some of us have a core wound that is really, the strong foundation of kind of how we interact with reality,
Yeah.
especially our
Wow.
relationships. And it's really fascinating when you read this book, these wounds actually show up in our physical bodies as well. And
Yeah.
so for my biggest wound is abandonment wounding. And so abandonment wounding shows up in the physical body with like a little bit more of like a hunched posture, like kind of retreating into yourself because you're scared that the world's going to abandon you. So you kind of like just retreat in. And so
Dude, and I was talking so much about my posture in the beginning.
I feel you.
I may
It's
or
a
may
whole
not
thing.
have a psychosomatic wound in there. That's interesting.
It's more than just being on your phone, right? There's an emotional
Right.
tie to your physical body and your posture.
Wow.
And so to look at those wounds and when they showed up, like a humiliation wound for me was, I had this real big fear of public speaking. And I had a memory when I was in 4th grade. It was the first time I spoke in front of my class, and speaking in front of the class, I was really unprepared for the speech or whatever I had to give. And I just froze and everybody laughed at me. And the teacher didn't know how to handle that situation or support me in that. And so every single time. And then I remember like my freshman year of college, I had the COM 101 class and I had to give my first speech, and it was in front of like 10 people in the class. And it was like, obviously like nobody really cared, but I was deathly scared of this experience. And it's been fascinating to continue to like work into that and like step into it and be a lot more comfortable speaking in public. Like a lot of those, the energy that I feel within myself when I go public speak is still the same, but I have the tools to reframe that into excitement rather than like just getting attached to the story of like, oh my God, I'm going to be humiliated in front of all these people. And to look back on that base experience and being able to process that and relive it. And like, that's all this really somatic release and trauma healing is, to really go back and relive it from a place of support and love. Because we all have those inner childs that live still within us in our psyche, and to bring them, to the surface and love them in the way that we needed to be loved back then. There's a lot of cathartic healing that takes place. And I love
why
that.
is he talking about everything that we talk about on the podcast? Why is he straight up quoting us?
I brought him on the podcast.
I love him. This guy is awesome.
People.
It's true. And real quick,
the law of attraction works.
Yes, exactly. Well, and from my side of the screen here, from a hypnotherapy standpoint, you do get that. It's called a critical filter that separates the conscious from the subconscious at about 7, 8, 9 years old. So whatever we've experienced to that point, unless it's been released by other means, kind of, as you were talking about, different words, same shit. It just goes into the subconscious where it kind of stays there until you either can see it from an adult perspective and process it in that way, like you were saying, or, through other means of just kind of processing it another way. But it kind of does create, whether we want it to or not, whether it makes sense or not, whether we like it or not, there are things, we all have it, that kind of just are sticking around because at one point we needed it and it's just kind of outstayed its welcome. So I'm really happy that you touched on that. I don't think we could talk about it enough because it's so important. And we all have that little 9-year-old kid inside, just like wanting something from us. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong with it would be if you just kept ignoring it. So stop doing that, people. When you talk to yourself, you're talking to a 9-year-old. So talk nice.
I want to add a little tidbit that I know and understand about the whole childhood trauma. And that's not only what you said, Joe, which is that like oftentimes we're just not resourced in that moment. And there's something that we didn't get that we needed, but also when we're so little, we don't understand that it's not about us and we make everything about us, right?
Yeah.
So your parents get divorced and then you make it mean as a child with no other logical explanation. Oh, if I was better, they wouldn't have gotten a divorce. Or, this is about me being bad or wrong. Like those kids laughed at me because I suck, like you make it about you because kids are so narcissistic in the most pure form of the word, like very self-centered. They can't understand really other people's perspectives and why things happen.
And
they
it
just
really
make it mean something bad about themselves. And then you carry that your whole life.
Well, if it's an adult, it's because as a child, you look to adults for everything. You look to them for all the answers. You look to them for nourishment. You look to them for love. You look to them for all your needs. So if they fail, they're not failing. You did. And you can't, like, a child can't look at an authority and be like, oh, they suck. Because they're the adult. They should know. Until they get to a certain point and you realize your parents are really flawed people. Like we just don't get there. It's a whole other thing. But at the child brain, yes, I agree. I just think that well, I know that children look to adults as just the person that knows. So if they messed up, I must have done something because they can't do anything wrong. That's why abuse victims take it on themselves. That's why, like any really trauma, you kind of implode on yourself in a way, because outside of you, you're the only thing that you can kind of say that about, because everyone else should have it together. You know what I mean? It's just, parents, man.
Yeah. And I think,
Grown-ups.
the more healing I've done too is it's this judgment, right? Like you said, Kelsey, when you take it on yourself, you start judging yourself. Like,
Yeah.
what did I do in this situation? And we develop these judgment, and that's really what develops shame, right? And all shame is fear of judgment. And when you start judging yourself, then you feel judgment from the world, and you start judging the world. And that's where a lot of division comes from that we're dealing with collectively right now, is when I look at somebody and they get triggered, and they something triggers an internal wound within them, and then that energy gets projected out onto me, and I take it. That's what creates division. But to start doing this work, you start having a compassion for people. Like, okay, they triggered, this is nothing I did, it's something within themselves, and you can develop a deeper compassion. And to get to that point is to just release the judgment of self. And to release judgment of self is really this processing, healing journey. And that's why the most important thing, and what I'm building with the Heart Collective and working with athletes, is this community environment where it's a safe space for us to talk about the things that we have shame around, which is all just the things we have judgment for, which is our deepest, darkest secrets. And we hold on to those because we fear that if we share them, we'll be judged for having them. And if you create a safe space, non-judgmental container where it's okay to talk about these things, a lot of times a cathartic release happens, and people release the judgment of self, and then they start releasing the judgment of others. And that's really this healing journey that we're going on individually, so that we can heal collectively as well. So we can all come together. Like you said, we all want to experience the same things. We all desire to be loved, to be seen, to be heard. And we all, have the same kind of core woundings that are shaping the lens in which we view reality. And so if we can look within ourselves and do the healing work on ourselves, and have the awareness of everything that in my environment that triggers something within me is my own journey and my own healing that needs to take place. And if we can show up and move that energy out, we can show up and be present for others and provide that safe space for them to not feel judged. And that's kind of this healing ripples that are going to take place that are taking place collectively, which is really exciting to be a part of and to witness.
Yeah.
The healing
So
ripples.
important. So important.
It
Especially
is.
right now. Your work that you're doing is very important. And I think that the focus that you're putting on the group that you are, because you're like them, you understand them, you feel like you have you can relate, of course. It's just so important. I feel like it's so untapped. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there needs to be more of you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's funny when I had this vision, because like I said, I went on the road for 2 years on this self discovery journey of healing, and I finally got to a place where it's like, okay, now what do I do with all of these tools and all this experience that I've had? How can I be of service to the world? What's my purpose? And I got the insight to start a community and help facilitate this type of healing for former athletes. And honestly, like, that was the biggest fear ever. Like, so much resistance. Like, I don't want to do that. And I truly believe that the thing that we fear the most is our, calling, right? Like, fear is a compass, something we should head towards, and to understand, like, the fear is the thing that we're being called to overcome, to go after. And so I went on a year journey of really looking at where those fears came from. And it's this fear of being seen within myself, this fear of being incapable, this fear of unworthiness, and being a leader, especially in that environment. So, like, part of my big story is I played football for 16 years, but on reflection, I never really felt like I reached my fullest potential, because I always had these intuitive hits while I was playing to step up as a leader. And I always played small. I'm like, okay, like, now's the time to give a speech, or like, rah, get everybody going. And I'll be like, oh no, like, I'm too scared. Like, what does that mean? And I never allowed myself to step into the leader that I know I'm capable of being. And it's fascinating that the universe, when I was done playing, part of me was kind of running away, right? I got in the van and I like left everything behind. And so part of me was a little kid running away and being like, I never really fully accomplished it. Nobody else knew this story. This is just an internal story within myself. Like, obviously, objectively, I accomplished a lot. I played 8 years in the NFL. Like, any kid should be happy with that. But I knew that I didn't reach my fullest potential. And the universe was like, now what are you going to do? You're going to go continue to learn the lesson. Like, you have to be a leader. That's what you're here to do. And so I had to go on my own journey of understanding who I am and the leader that I am and the ability I have, and just finding this innate worthiness to step up, because this is the work that the world needs. and coming full circle back into this, kind of environment that I felt like I couldn't really be myself. And now this healed version of me going back into it, it's very challenging, but I do, like you said, it's what the world needs right now. There's all these people coming out being like life coaches and self-development and reaching higher levels of success and all this stuff. But to really do it, there's a layer deeper that a lot of people aren't really accessing and facilitating and teaching. And it's like you're looking deep within your stories of and these experiences that shape the lens in which you view reality. And when you can look at those and heal those, you can really step into who you are and your fullest potential and the essence of who you are, which is really a spiritual experience, a spiritual journey that is totally missing from, a lot of our world.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
There's so much I was going to say, and now I forgot it all.
But then you were just like,
I was so enthralled.
The mic drop.
Just enthralled. What was it? It was so good. Well, it was something that you said that I was like, yes. Oh, when you were saying the biggest thing that you fear is likely the thing you need to do. We've all experienced those. And I think a little addendum needs to be made where if it's an expansive fear, like I know you felt like, oh yeah, I should probably do that, but oh, I'm really scared. That's how I felt about this podcast. They asked me to do it. True. I was like, ooh, what? I don't want to do it. I'm scared. I was thinking immediately of all the excuses I had not to do it. I was like, what could I say? What can I tell them in a nice way that says no? And then I called Kelsey and she's like, no freaking way, we're doing it. And, the only thing I was afraid of, I think, was saying something stupid or putting my foot in my mouth. But my foot lives in my mouth. I've just made my peace with it. It's done. It's happening. So I'm never going to say anything right.
And that's your fear of judgment of what others are going to think you messing up is just a judgment of yourself. And by you putting yourself out there and realizing, oh wow, like nobody really cares. Like
nobody
showing up
cares.
in my heart. Exactly. Like everybody just cares about their own self. Everybody's just judging themselves and they're scared that you care about them, but like you don't really. And if you do care about them, it's because that's the thing that you're judging within yourself. And to fully understand that is to start letting go of these judgments, which is really how you find real inner freedom, and I think it's fascinating that, our biggest ideal in this country is like, freedom and like, our freedom to do whatever we want. And, on this journey I've been on, it's like, if you are listening to this and you have ever said, oh, I wish I could do that, or I wish I could do that, but this thing is happening, or I don't have the opportunity, I don't have the resources. Are you really free? Because real freedom is to understand that you are the creator of your experience. You are the creator of your reality. I'm not saying it's an easy journey just to drop everything and go do it, but start looking at the stories and the blocks and the resistance of why you're holding yourself back, because you're the only person holding you back from experiencing what you want to experience. And so to go on that journey is to look at those blocks and those resistances, and those are where the healings take place. Because honestly, we're all the same. Like all of us sitting on this call, like in this moment, like what separates us from each other? It's the stories of who we think we are, what we think we're capable of. And that's the inner work. And when you can really shift those stories and become the creator of your story, that's total freedom. And that's when the real magic happens. And that's when this experience of life becomes a real gift.
Yeah.
I was going to say the only thing that separates us is the beard, really. Honestly, if you guys are watching this on the Patreon, you can see Joe's glorious facial hair. It is a sight to see. It makes you look like a bear.
I was going to say a Viking.
Does a bear like resonate with you as like a spirit animal in any way?
Yeah, bear.
Okay, so now it makes sense why you look like one.
Yeah.
My whole family, I have my dad and my brothers are all very hairy men. And so I love a beard because it just reminds me of like my people, like my dad and my brothers, they're just furry. And now one of my sons is furry and I'm so excited. He's going to have such an amazing beard when he grows up. So excited. Anyway, yes, the beard is magnificent.
I had an idea. So speaking of limiting stories, I think it'd be cool and fun and helpful to the people listening to go around and each of us shares a limiting story that we notice that we've been carrying or anything that recently has come up for us. And I can start since it's my prompt. Because I think that would help normalize this for people, because even maybe people look at us and they say, oh, he was in the NFL for so many years. Oh, Lindsay and Kelsey, they're so awesome. They host this podcast, but like everyone's just a person. We all have limiting stories. We all have these things that we make up. So for example, mine, which I recently realized, I didn't even know this was going on in my head, which is why it's so important to do the self-inquiry and get curious, right? Was that I felt like I wasn't ready to teach people to a certain level unless I could like almost this ridiculous belief of like, unless I can help everyone with everything, like until I know it all, like I just shouldn't even try. I just shouldn't teach. I just shouldn't. And then I was working with a friend who helped me shift it. And she was like, honestly, the most perfect people who need your help, they only need what you already know. Like you don't need to know more. You don't need to learn more. Like the people that are going to resonate with you and learn from you, like you're already ready to serve those people. So instead of trying to go for everyone, why don't you focus on the people who are already waiting and need what you have to say and the way that you look at things and the way that you present ideas. And I was just like,
Right.
man.
And then when you learn more, it can be for yourself, because then you'll be able to add it to your toolbox anyway. It just won't be for
exactly.
It'll
but
be,
it was just
it's
crazy
freer.
that I like never really realized this consciously
Yeah.
before. And it has been holding me back in a lot of ways. Now that I know it and I brought it to the light, it doesn't have to hold me back in that way anymore.
Mm.
Who wants to go next?
I have a very similar story just to piggyback on that, and then I'll kind of share another one. But yeah, I always felt like I needed to find that missing piece of information that was going to give me the answer so that I could help support people. Like, I know the answer that you're looking for, so come to me because I'm the expert. And that led me on a path. Like, part of my journey of healing was searching, right, and seeking this answer. Like, what is the secret to the universe? Like, what is it? And through all these different plant medicine ceremonies, like exploring consciousness and learning and reading all these books and just looking for that answer. What's the kernel of truth that's going to give me the answer that everybody's going to want to come to me because I have it? And realizing, it got to a point where I realized that's an infinite journey and there is no answer, right?
Wouldn't that be great if there was just a box you could open and be like, oh, there it is. Cool.
You're like, oh, the answer. Okay, I'm done. Great.
So I had an experience in one of my ayahuasca ceremonies that was really profound. I was kind of in this space of infinite potential. And it was really frightening because every thought I had, I would become that thought and that story living out. But in that process, I would lose all sense of myself and who I was. And I realized that is the answer. Like, in that space, I had this thought of like, what am I searching for? What am I seeking for? I'm seeking the answer. And I was in this infinite void of potential. And I realized, okay, that is the answer. I'm the answer. It's not about having the answer, but it's about being able to hold space and develop that presence to create from, right? And so that was a really powerful experience for me and grounded me into not needing to seek so much for the truth, to know that I am the truth. And to have that connection and that alignment with the divine is to really become a channel for the truth that wants to come out in the experience and the relationship. That, like, let's say I'm a coach, it's this intuitive knowing that can come through. And a lot of times we all have our own answers, right? So coaching isn't like, hey, come to me because I have the answers. It's, hey, I can hold space and get you curious about your own journey because you have the answers within yourself. And a lot of times you're just not aware of them because you're either hiding from them or there are deeper parts of your unconscious that you're not necessarily aware of. And I can just reflect that back to you. And so that was a beautiful journey. And I definitely think that's a huge thing that a lot of people, especially in the spiritual community, go on, is like this path of seeking to find the answer and the secret to the universe. And I promise you, it's not out there. It's within. You are the answer, right? And once you fully understand, like, one of my mentors shared this with me a while ago, and it wasn't until I fully understood this when I was able to like let go of that path of seeking. And it's what you're seeking is where you're seeking from. And to fully understand what that means is to have touched enlightenment.
Hey there. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far, but if you want to listen to the whole thing, we're going to invite you over to our podcast. Either search for Vibin It on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to podcasts, or even better, if you want to watch the extended video version of this episode that's even longer than the actual podcast itself, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/highvibe. Lindsay, tell them what's awesome about the Patreon.
Patreon is where we have all of our extended episodes. As Kelsey said, we have it on video, so you can actually see the things that we're talking about. Sometimes we have visual aids, and it's nice to know what we're talking about. We also have hangouts that we do sometimes that are exclusive to Patreon people. And you can get started with all of this and bonus content and everything that we have only for the Patreon people for as little as $3. I think it's $3.33 a month. And that's it. And you guys can get all the benefits and all access to everything that we put in there. Really cool.
It's really cool, really fun, super easy to join. And you guys don't even have to do that to finish this episode. If you're like, screw it, I don't want to pay any money, I just want to hear the rest of this episode, go to our podcast, Hi Vibin It, search for it wherever you listen. It's totally free. Either way, enjoy the rest of the show wherever you choose to enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week because we do a new one every week. Adios.
Bye.